We talked about it, in the heart of a Georgia-Alabama week in college football country. Such crazy news about the Atlanta Braves with so many fans around here. We had to go first segment on the Atlanta Braves. Let's get a professional's opinion on what this is coming down to. And no possibility of a game 163, which is mind-blowing. We could get to some math problem to decide a playoff team. I can't wait to hear what Buster has to say.
He is the professional. We'll ask about it. The great Buster Olney, ESPN, with us weekly on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline. Good morning, Buster. How are you today?
I'm doing great, but as you guys know, get ready for chaos.
Yep, you can count on it. Did Dave O'Brien, who covers the Braves, I know you know Dave, a lot of Braves fans like Dave, he was laying out how Major League Baseball could have handled this better. Did they butcher this situation, in your opinion?
It's no different than how they handle a lot of their situations in the past. I think generally speaking, through their experience, they don't like to be, chicken little when it comes to the weather and be like, oh my God, a week away, the forecast looks terrible. I do think that they could have had a conversation on Sunday about, this is not like some squall coming through. This is a big deal that, how the weather has affected them. The first conversation, from what I've heard from people within both the Mets and the Braves organization about this, was on Tuesday, guys. And, if you're not planning ahead, then it's not really, you're not going to be in a position to make a change. You can't do something like in the spur of the moment and say, hey, guys, get together and we'll play an afternoon game on Tuesday afternoon. If you were going to do that, you needed to have that conversation on Sunday night. That didn't happen. I do think going forward, they should anticipate better situations like this. I will tell you that, just from talking with Major League Baseball officials, they don't want to take away any team's advantage. At no point have they discussed with the Braves the idea of moving these games to another site because they don't want to take that advantage away from the Braves. And let me tell you, the Braves aren't offering either. Like, they fully, given all the choices, they fully embrace the idea that we're going to, there's a very good chance we're going to wind up playing these games on Monday. And on top of that, and I'd also say this, baseball teams, I think, are generally speaking, they expect chaos. You think about the Texas Rangers last year, the way their year went, last 7 games on the road, 2 games in Tampa Bay on the road to start the playoffs, 2 games in Baltimore in the division series, 11 straight games on the road. And that became part of the Rangers' story when they went on and won the World Series. People I talked to in the Braves organization yesterday were like, yep, it's less than ideal. It stinks. We have a lot of choices we have to make about our pitching staff. Welcome to baseball.
and I do like the chaos. The baseball purist out there, we would have had this thing locked in Philadelphia and Dodgers, and that would have been it. And now you've got so many different things that could happen. Mets, Diamondbacks, Braves. Right now, though, of those 3, who do you think is the best and could actually make a good postseason run?
The Mets. I think right now they're as good an overall team. And I just saw them on Sunday Night Baseball playing the Phillies. They are playing really well, and they have a very good all-around team. It's depth in the lineup. It's rotation with Sean Manaea, Luis Severino taking a big step forward this year. Edwin Diaz at the back end of the bullpen. He looks great right now. The Braves, if the Braves win in the postseason, it's going to be because they ride that great pitching staff. If the Diamondbacks win in the postseason, it's going to be because they would ride the backs of this incredible offense, despite the fact that they've had this terrible pitching. So there are a lot of incomplete teams right now. I think the Mets are actually one of the more complete teams among the playoff clubs.
Well, when you heard there would be no possibility of a 163, we could get into lengthy tiebreakers. What did you think? For me as a kid, Bucky Dent was one of the great moments in baseball history.
I know. And they had those conversations a couple of years ago when they restructured the playoff format. I personally like the idea that you could, have a playoff game. Heck, ESPN has broadcast some of those, so I'm a little bit biased. But I also think that by going to tiebreakers, it underscores something really important in baseball, and that is the integrity of the 162 and having that mean something. You know what? If you are the Kansas City Royals, you own the tiebreaker against the Detroit Tigers because you beat them during the course of the year. I think they don't have it against the Minnesota Twins. Those things are important. I think that, respecting what's gone on over the 6 months versus playing one game at the end, if I'm making a choice, I'd rather go with a 162 perspective.
I feel like there's no thinking that Major League Baseball wanted this doubleheader on Monday with all this on the line, right? That's really what they wanted. No. I mean,
no. Now I will tell you this. I had someone in baseball say to me yesterday, "Are we upset that you guys are all talking about the chaos that we have down the stretch and we're talking about the baseball scenario?" No, they're not. It's kind of like when a fight breaks out. On one hand, Major League Baseball is not going to condone fighting. And on the other hand, they're like, "Well, that's too bad. Everyone's talking about that major brawl that broke out." And I think baseball, they like the idea that we're talking about this, but so they'll sit back and watch. I am going to be fascinated, guys. Today, I called into the Braves organization. Today, they're sitting out and they're walking through all the scenarios about how they should handle their pitching staff as they go forward. They could just keep it in line. Chris Sale, right, could go in the game on Friday. But you also could try to finesse it and say, you know what, we're going to announce that Sale, because Sale can only pitch, once between now and the end of Monday. And so maybe you could line it up so that he's one of your starting pitchers on Monday. And if those games turn out to be, you make the postseason before that, then maybe he's in line to pitch game one of the playoffs. If you start him on Friday, your attitude is, look, we just need to win today's game, and you focus on winning the game on Friday and Sale pitches then, he would be available to pitch in game 2 of a series, likely against the Milwaukee Brewers. There are a lot of different ways to go on this thing. Just knowing, Brian Snitker, knowing Alex Anthopoulos, my guess is they just take it game by game and just say, we want the best available starter to us today.
Buster, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you were one of those that never panicked on the Astros. I think there were other people in your business that the Astros get off to a horrific start in April. They're 10 games back at one particular time, but they do typical Astros things, and they find a way to win the AL West. Were you in that camp where you really never panicked with the Astros, and how big of a threat are they right now in the AL?
So at no point did I say, yeah, they're done. Kind of like a couple of years ago when I told you guys that there was no way the Braves could win the division. And then they came storming back, right? I didn't make the same mistake. I did say they were in trouble. And, the question was whether or not they could get their pitching back together. And Hunter Brown has taken a huge step forward. This is someone who is a high draft pick, a touted prospect, but for whatever reason, he would always find an inning or two that would fall apart on him during each of his starts. He's overcome that. Framber Valdez has rediscovered that great sinker that he has. He's gotten better. Yusei Kikuchi was maybe the best trade addition for any team in baseball. So they are stabilized for sure. And that group of veterans that they have on that team remind me so much of the late 90s Yankees teams that I covered, where the players just, assume, when the chips are down, biggest games of the year, we will figure it out. There's a reason why the Astros have played in 7 straight American League Championship Series.
If I asked you a question, would you want to be, if I gave you 1 day salary, $7,000 for 1 day, but you have to be the usher today in Oakland for the A's final game, and you're responsible for keeping things in check in your section and nothing getting broken or stolen, would you take the $7,000?
I would do it today, because hopefully people there, based on the social media posts that I'm seeing, a lot of reporters and other folks are reminding the fans, look, John Fisher, the horrible owner of the A's, doesn't own the ballpark. You're stealing. You're not stealing from John Fisher, okay? You're not making a statement by ripping seats out of that place. This is such an incredibly sad situation. They should have found a way to keep the ballpark there. And, I saw some tweets this morning. People are ripping Rob Manfred. It's not Rob Manfred, okay? It's the 30 owners refusing to hold each other accountable. At some point, I can't believe the other 29 owners haven't stepped up and said, John Fisher, this is a terrible situation that you've created for us. It's going to be an embarrassment going forward. The idea they're going to play games in a AAA park in Sacramento for the next 3 years is a joke. And every day, they're going to all look like a joke because this is going to be going on. And by the way, it's going to be a disaster. If you guys have seen the weather in Sacramento this year, it's over 100 degrees every day. It's going to be awful, and it's going to continue. And at no point did the other owner step in and say, "Hey, John, you know what? We're going to buy the team off you, and we're going to take because you're not living up to our standards." And whether it's tanking or whether it's the sign stealing that went on in baseball, or whether it's the A's situation, the other owners will not hold themselves to be accountable. And it's terrible. It's awful for the whole business.
Well, and that organization, Buster, like the iconic uniform, they've had so many, early 70s, they were so good. The 80s, Billy Beane's tenure and the way he actually assembled the roster. I was just going to ask you, like, for me, and it was a negative moment for them, but I just remember Dennis Eckersley being such a lockdown closer in '88, in Game 1, obviously, with Gibson going up there. And a Dodger fan, that was one of my great sports memories. But when I think A's, I just think about how dominant Eckersley was for that moment in time. What is that one A's memory for you?
Man, and that, of course, is being grown up a Dodger fan, I was tortured by that team. They beat my Dodgers in 1974 in the World Series. I think the swag of those teams, always jumped out. Charlie Finley, the late owner, he paid players to grow mustaches in the late 60s, early 70s, and they had more hair than any other team, and they ran more than any other team. And they had Reggie Jackson, having having the swag that he did. You had guys in the clubhouse having fights, Bill North against Vida Blue, and I mean, that team was so fun and had such a style. And the idea that that's going to go away is so sad. And that fan base, look, they don't show up at 50,000 people the way that they necessarily do at Dodger Stadium every game. But those who show up have always been incredibly passionate. And you will see that passion, I think, in their last games.
Charlie Finley, by the way, an Alabama native, Inslee, Alabama, right here. And, we had the Birmingham A's for a long period of time. We talked about that earlier this year. And he's the owner, if I remember correctly, that took the team from Kansas City to Oakland, right? He's the guy that took them out there.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And he was he was an innovator. He was advocating for orange baseballs, for designated runners, for, making it a more palpable product. He also was incredibly cheap.
Yep.
And I don't know how many lawsuits went between he and Major League Baseball during his tenure. He made two of the more famous trades that weren't approved. They were killed by the commissioner, where he sold players. He sold Vida Blue to the Yankees. He sold Joe Rudy and Raleigh Fingers to the Red Sox. And the commissioner overturned those trades for the good of baseball.
I remember you brought up the Oakland memory. I don't know why but the 90 World Series when the Reds swept them was just so shocking to me.
Well, I mean, think about those A's teams.
They were so good.
They beat the Giants, but they lose to the Dodgers and the Reds as better teams.
I know. I mean, they had the Bash brothers. They had Dave Stewart. They had Eckersley. I mean, that was such a good team, and it just seemed like that Reds team was just a ragtag group.
Yeah, and they also that A's team were sort of one at the core of what became the steroid era.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
I remember Tony Gwynn, the great star for the San Diego Padres, telling me going in to do a workout in the Oakland weight room in spring training and seeing the amount of weights the players were lifting, and he was like, "Oh my God!" You had McGuire and you had Canseco and all those guys. I mean, they were an incredibly dynamic team with great players. They have always stood out among franchises, and it's not only about the colors, the green and gold.
I covered the 1990 Reds. Leave it to this bunch right here to say that Larkin, the Nasty Boys, Eric Davis, I believe, in center field, were a bunch of ragtag guys.
They were
a massive underdog.
Having a big moment in the World Series. That was cool.
It's a ragtag group.
Yeah, they're not a ragtag group.
So, Buster, tell me the last time the A's had a winning record. I'm looking at this right here.
It's got to be like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, it was 2021. Right. Well, I guess, in 2020, weird year, they were 36-24. I mean, they had a good run from 18, 19, 20, 21, and then it obviously went off the rails.
Okay, so the great thing about the A's franchise, being operated under Billy Beane, and I'm not going to have the years exactly right, but generally speaking, and I had this conversation with Billy as the practice of tanking really began to gain popularity among owners, to save money. Billy was appalled by that. Like he couldn't stand the idea of what Houston did and what the Cubs did in the early 2010s. And every year, yeah, they had to sell off players because he's given a budget. He has to work within the budget. So he trades a Tim Hudson, he trades a Mark Mulder. He makes those deals, but he always put together great teams. He was trying to win from a period, I believe, of 1997 to 2012. The two teams with the best records, or were always 500 in that stretch, were the New York Yankees and the Oakland A's. Billy did a great job of keeping that team competitive despite their payroll challenges.
Next time we talk to Buster, it will be Wild Card Thursday. And there are few times of year, if any, that are better than when we've got Major League postseason, NFL, and college football going on at the same time. It's terrific. We will be in the midst of that next Thursday with Buster. Thank you so much for the time, Buster. Have a great weekend.
All right, guys, hang in there. It's going to be wild this weekend.
Thank you, Buster.
See you, Buster. Buster Olney with us each week on the JohnstonRVCenter.com hotline.